So tonight's session, I've got Mike Walker, Victor Alpha 3, Mike Whiskey from Ontario, Canada, who works for Flex Radio, to give a presentation on remote radio and how to, all the things you need to know about setting up remote radio, et cetera. And he briefly said to do this. He does three different sessions on remote radio, and this is sort of an introduction to it, discuss requirements, everything. So hopefully Ontario, Canada, and Jimmy are on the same time zone, not Eastern, and daylight savings time or whatever. And he's supposed to be online at 7:15. So we'll hopefully look for him here.
Okay. And you can see my screen.
Yes. Yes.
Very good. Let me just clean up a bit of stuff here. And it's not going to let me do that. There we go.
The lights on.
Very good. How many people do we have in the room?
And we have remote.
We also have some people remote.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Oh, there. What a great looking room. So, I'm Mike Walker. I'm with Flex Radio, and I was asked to come forward with a presentation about remote HF operating. And if you don't know what Flex Radio is, for those in the room anyway, are you all HF operators and you know what the product is? Do I need to go explain any further? I'm happy to do that. I'll touch on it anyway. Flex Radio builds a 100 watt. Hi there. 100 watt HF radio from 160 through to 6 meters, mostly. And I want you to think about HF radio over the years and what it's been. And it's all been one box with the knobs and the display and the RF unit all in one box. So that meant we always had to have a radio on the desk, and we had to drag feed lines to the radio. And feed lines are expensive in so many ways. Good feed lines cost a lot of money. But not only that, we lose signal in those feed lines from receiving and transmitting. So, if you could get the RF deck closer to the antennas, you actually get better on the air because you can hear better. Your signals are stronger. And you get more RF out on the air because we're not losing RF power in the feed line. And it's not uncommon to lose 3 dB, which is half our power in feed lines as we get into some of the higher frequencies. So with that, Flex Radio developed a radio, over 10 years now, called the Flex 6000 series. And the heart of that radio was its ability to work on a computer network. And part of that same heart of the ability was to be able to use it remotely. And remote means many things to different people. It means we can now not put the radio on my desk. I could put it in a different room. I could put it at the base of the tower. I could put it half a world away if that was important to me. In my case, my remote HF operating is 100 miles away because it's just too noisy here in the city of Toronto. And that's what remote sort of encapsulates. But let's go through, what are the things you would consider in a remote. And like I said, you can be from another room in the house, another state, another city, another country. You can use pretty much anything now as a client. That means, what do I use to operate the radio, from Flex Radio Maestros, which I'll talk about near the end, from using an iPhone, an iPad, a computer. And before you roll your eyes and go, why would I use a computer to control my radio? Consider this. Any new HF rig, and the ones we grew up with, we love them because they've got a million buttons and knobs, right? They literally have a whole pile of buttons and knobs. Anybody in the room that I can see want to guess how many buttons and knobs are on the front of a Yaesu FTDX 5000, which was one of Yaesu's, or still is, top of the line radios? Put your hand up if you think it's under 100. Over 100. Oh, you're all wimps. Come on, you can answer. It's 118. Okay. And it's 118 with multiple levels of shift or function. Press and hold function key, press and hold the button, press and tap the button, press and hold it for 1 second. And you know what? Then they label it in tiny 6-point font, and where none of us are getting any younger, so we pull out a magnifying glass so we can read it. And we get the flashlight out. Okay. And the advantage of using a computer screen as your interface is that we can make it as big as we want. We can put it at eye level. We can use a mouse, which makes it easier to touch the button. So I've had people say, oh, it's a computer, it's too hard to use. And you know what? I think jumping on a new fully loaded HF radio with that type of display is akin to jumping into the cockpit of an A3, of a Airbus or something. So why do we run remote? Let me put this in this mode I like. Okay, come on, play, Mike. Bear with me a second. There we go. So one of the major reasons for me was we deal with urban noise. And today, my urban noise is 20 dB higher than it was 10 years ago, which means I need a signal to be well over, almost 2S units better for me to hear it. And I can show many demonstrations here from my urban antennas in Toronto versus my remote, where here I could actually look at the band and see and think of the band's dead. And yet I log into my remote and it certainly isn't. HOA restrictions, which are pretty common. If you're moving into downsizing, hey, a lot of hams today, a lot of our customers have combined, and 3 or 4 people will build a remote radio station at somebody's QTH and they just share it. And they share the expenses, the internet cost, and when a lot of us aren't climbing anymore, putting up bigger antennas, and so you have crowd support to keep your HF station running, and with that, the better location so you can hear more. Club stations, a lot of clubs have had club stations. Now you don't have to go into the club to operate. You can operate from the convenience of your couch with your 807. And heck, maybe you're still a road warrior. I still have younger friends that are road warriors and they operate while they're traveling. And you know what, with that noise floor, if you can't hear them, you can't work them. If you get a HF radio in a quiet location, it's a whole new world. And right now with the Beauvais de-expedition going on, I have no problem hearing them from my remote because it's quiet. They're, S3, S4 is about the loudest I've heard them because they're half a world away, but I have friends that can't hear them at all. So typically your traditional ham shack might have looked like this, right? We've got everything on one bench, all the radios. I used to have a shelf in front of me that was 4 shelves high because I had to get all the equipment there. Well, you can see behind me, my whole satellite station is behind me. I don't need to have it in front of me anymore. So now we get to the point, like I said, we can move the radio closer to the antenna. All we need now, thanks to the internet's incredibly reliable. It's incredibly fast. Everybody talks about latency, but I can be honest with you, latency is not an issue. Neither is bandwidth. There are so many ways to control things remotely. And again, like I said earlier, it gives you the ability to operate from anywhere. So what makes it so difficult? Well, if you use the wrong radio, that can make it difficult. And like I said, gone are the days of having the controlling, the displays, the knobs attached to the RF deck. Those of you that worked in the Motorola days, we all familiar with the control head days because the radio was just too big. Well, maybe those days are back. And then we have to deal with, if it's truly remote, meaning I'm not going to be at it forever, and it's not in my basement, then you need to consider if amplifiers are an issue, turning rotators are, maybe a bigger antenna system, switching, and power management. The good news is today, those are all very easily solvable problems, hugely even over the last 10 years. So there's a bit of Murphy's Law, if something will fail or if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong no matter what you do. You can have an internet outage, you could have a power outage, you could have some sort of weird software crash. In my case, I think this is where my story pops up. It was a whole modem firmware update. I'll talk about that in a minute. Lightning and weather are all things to consider. So if you think of your shack today and you're wanting to do anything remote, look at it all sitting there in front of you. And if you wanted to clean it up and get rid of it, can you reboot everything? Because I guarantee there's something there that needed to be power cycled at one time or another. So in my case, in my first early days when I started remoting in 2005, I used a Kenwood TS480, and I used Ham Radio Deluxe because it had this really cool client server mode. And one day, midwinter, my station goes away. I can't connect to it. And I generally try not to go up to the station at all during the winter. In fact, I have not been at my station since January the 9th, when I actually, believe it or not, had to change out a rotator in the middle of the winter. But that's, the rotators failed. It went away. So I phone up the cable company. It was called Cable, really, and, they paid a lot for the marketing on that name, I guess. And I get the guy on the phone, and he was very helpful. And he said, "Oh yeah, Mr. Walker, we pushed a firmware update out last night about 3 a.m. And all you have to do is just walk over to the modem and unplug it and plug it back in." Great. Hour and a half drive each way. And on my way there, I stopped at Canadian Tire, which is much like stopping at Home Depot. Picked up a Christmas tree timer, and got up there, booted the modem, and everything came back alive. And I put the Christmas tree timer in line so that at least through the winter, that at 3 o'clock, it would pull the power off the entire network and come back on at 3:15. Not the cleanest way to do it, but it kept the station running for the last of the winter. So as they say, necessity is the mother of the invention type of thing. So there's 4 pieces of a remote station: the radio, and I'm going to repeat this a couple of times. If you're thinking of running remote, the radio is a key choice. Kenwood, ICOM, Yaesu, Elecraft can all do remote, but they're not the easiest to remote because you need to have networking skills. You need to know things like Dyn DNS, port forwarding, VPNs, which make it a little more complicated. Now, all very solvable, but if you don't know anything about it, you've then got to learn it or corner a 16-year-old to help you with it. Antennas, and if you're using, an easiest way is just a single broadband antenna. For years, I had one antenna. It was a HF6V all-band vertical. Wasn't the best for contesting, but it got me on the air, and I was quite happy with that. But I had to keep making it better. The internet connection, which we talked about, bandwidth isn't the issue anymore. The issue is what's called latency and jitter. And the issue is actually jitter. And if you want to learn all about jitter, chase down what the gamers are doing, because the gamers hate jitter because it affects their latency and it affects them, their first-person shooter guys, at getting killed. And then the command and control. So if you were doing a club station, can I turn everything off, on and off? So the internet's not a big deal anymore. Most of us can get very quick internet. Heck, even Starlink is plenty fast enough, but it has its own little nightmare because they don't use a typical internet. They use something called CGNAT, and that requires some specialized skills. And if anybody wants more in those details, they can ask me or send me an email. But there's a very good group out in that run the D4C contest station, on the Canary Islands, which they use remotely quite often. And they built this tool called D40, and they sell it. It's not expensive. They sell it for €50 to go set it up. But for years, my internet was 5 megabits down and 1 megabit up, and I was very successful at that. If you start getting over 100 milliseconds on your ping times, your round trip times, that's quite a long time. Reality, I've operated from Germany during the Friedrichshafen Hamfest, and my round trip time is usually about 45 milliseconds back to North America. So what can't I do with that? High speed QSK-CW sort of takes a hit. And it always takes a hit over 30 words per minute because there will always be some minimal latency within an internet connection, even nearby. But it's my high-speed QSK operators that tend to take the hit. So in the Flex Radio world, we have a tool called SmartLink. It comes with the software. It's about as complicated to set up as a Gmail account. It connects directly to the radio and makes everything very easy. So in controlling this entire station, we've talked about you may want to be able to turn all the AC items on and off. You may be able to turn your DC items on and off, your 12-volt stuff. And I have two 12-volt circuits, one for a typical HF radio and one for all my 12-volt accessories. I use something called an Antenna Genius to switch my antennas by 403A. They make all network-based stuff, whereas it's really, you do want to get away from using RS-232 or USB devices because they're peer-to-peer stuff, like 2 tin cans and a string. It's really hard to share. And like I said earlier, you do want to be able to reboot something if you have to. So fortunately today, there's a lot of ways to turn everything on and off very easily. There are thousands of Internet of Things, IoT, all available on Amazon, which allows you to turn things on and off from your phone. You hook it up at the far end, you plug your lights in it, your power supply, or whatever, even your amplifier, because you could use a remote pool heater. And I look at my phone and I turn it on and off with the whatever app it came with. There are much more advanced remote power control units by Digital Logger, and there's a whole bunch of programmer controllers, and I'm going to talk about a couple of specialized ones in a minute, and I meant to fix that image, so I apologize for that. Here's a key thing I do, and a lot of my people who follow me have now done this, is I actually do leave a computer running at the remote end. And running a PC remotely isn't anything new. In fact, they've done it in the banking industry since the mid-90s. And I use little IBM Think Centers. I can get them inexpensively. They're set to always turn on if the power failures. They're incredibly reliable. I run Windows on them. So I know everybody gives Windows, a bad knock, but it's probably one of the most reliable pieces of equipment I have. I use tool called Tailscale to connect to it, so I don't have to set up a VPN. And the advantage of having that remote computer is I set that up for all my logging programs and all my digital programs. And if somebody wants to borrow my remote station, like several people do for contesting, they just have to connect to this computer and everything's already configured. I don't have to teach them how to configure WSJT or JTDX or MMTTY, it all just works. Now, what's missing is how do they use it and control things? Well, they use Smart SDR on a local PC. And I talked about Smart SDR as a software client you can run on your PC in your house, and it can connect to the radio remotely with a simple username and login. And it is a peer-to-peer connection. So it's low latency. There's no servers in the middle, very handy. So like I said, you run Smart SDR locally. You can use, if you're a contester, N1MM, Ham Radio Deluxe, Log4OM, whatever your favorite logging program is, WSJT for FT8, FT4, FT2, Q65. I happen to have rotors. There's now many RS-232 rotor control softwares available, software and controllers. And I run this all on that local PC just by connecting with built-in Windows Remote Desktop, or if you use a Pro version, or VNC, or a whole pile more. And it actually makes it really simple. Once you wrap your head about the fact that the Windows PC is actually incredibly reliable. So we talked about all these little IoT things. Do I have the box here? Dan N7HQ, who I work with, loves these devices by a company called Shelly. If you really wanted to wire your house, you can go look at Shelly's equipment, and they're designed to hide things and switches and stuff, but you can make things all work everywhere. And you don't need to build everything from scratch yourself, because even today, Sierra Systems, and if anybody listen to Ham Radio Workbench at all, which I'm on. Okay, so George, you've probably heard George, which is his company, has built this, and George is big about remote, called the Sierra Stations station controller, and you can glue a whole controller together. This is a Raspberry Pi running a web page on a product called Node-RED. We don't have to worry about that, but because that's all done. A lot of dry contact relays, a lot of voltage sensors, so you can monitor voltage, temperature sensors, and this system is 100% scalable to as many whatever you want, watt meters. It is a bit of, throw money at it and you can solve the problem. You can sort of see behind me this glow behind me. There's one of those on the side of the, actually the red glow over here. There's one sitting there for all my shack here to use my antenna switch, which I use actually to switch the antenna to multiple radios for testing rather than one radio to multiple antennas. And he's done a great job with it. And there's a GUI that comes with it. Mine's totally different. I rewrote mine, but that's because I could. And in my case, I have the controller in a boathouse where most of my radio equipment is. But I have a box out in my tower, which is almost 125 feet away. And I have another one of his controllers sitting there. And it uses RS-485, which is a long distance version of RS-232. Or I could have done it, the link to that box using a 900 meg Meshtastic LoRa radio. That's lots of different options. Very reliable stuff. And then the dashboard, like you saw here, and I'll just explode this, has, as you can see, it's got relay control, antenna selection, meters, and a whole bunch of cool stuff. And because it's running on a Pi, you can get creative and do a whole lot of things under the covers. And what used to be foreign for most of us to program is now not foreign, thanks to AI. You can go in and write a Python script to do something special, even if you don't know how to do Python. This is a big question I get. What about lightning? Well, what are you supposed to do in lightning? You're supposed to disconnect the radio and put it in the box and put it in the closet, right? None of us do that. And there's no app that yet takes the coax and throws it out the window. So we add, I use arc plugs on all my antennas. I ground everything, but there will be nothing that really prevents us from a direct strike. And probably in most cases, even at home, unless you absolutely disconnect every cable from the back of your radio, the answer is still the same. Because lightning's not just coming in through the feed line, it's coming in through power supplies, LAN cables, and etc. Touch wood, so far so good. So let's talk about shared remote stations. There's one commercial solution. I'll get to that. But iShare Radio is another George product that's going to allow people to pool their radios like a club and share them. So it's often I get clubs saying, hey, we have a club radio, but we have 18 users. Some have extras, some are technicians. And how do we control the radio and what it does? The iShare Radio does that. And then remote ham radio is a paid for service. And I've had a few people who use it saying they sold all their ham radio equipment, put all the money in an account, and they rent time from remote ham radio, and they're still not run out of money yet. So like I said before, iShare Radio allows user access control, scheduling systems, multi-operator support, club station support. And if you're interested in a club station work, they're starting to roll that out now. And remote ham radio allows you to rent time and get on the air on some pretty serious stations. Very popular, very useful. And again, you know, heck, I'll probably be using them once I get rid of my outside world. So why does it work so remotely? Well, the radio is designed on an Ethernet architecture, totally different than every other vendor. Because we're doing direct sampling also makes these radios incredibly quiet. There's no mixers. Mixers are noisy. Hybrid HF radios are noisy, regardless of what anybody tells you, for the companies that build a hybrid software-defined radio, because they're still mixing the front end. They still have to deal with the mixing, smearing, and products and noise. Flex makes it easy because of the smart link access, which is free with every radio. We talked about the low latency. And by the way, you can have two people use the same radio at the same time, anywhere on the spectrum, and they just share the transmitter. So you can decide, you just have to wait till the other guy's done transmitting, and then you can transmit wherever you are. Radio changes its transmit focus in a millisecond. And it is a fundamental part of the radio from the beginning. So I got asked to make sure I talk about remote CW. I'm just going to get a drink. Sending CW over the internet's really hard. Now you'd think we'd just, you'd just keep track of the tip or the ring or dot or dash and sort of how long is it pushed down and mirror it at the other side. So if I send a dash, immediately say, hey, just transmit, and I've sent a dot until I released, or the output of the keyer even. Well, the problem is the internet delays are elastic and they vary quite a bit. So the wrong way, but it's done today, is there is a WinKeyer tool that you would have a WinKeyer on your desk and you sent an A. It has to decode the letter A, send the letter A, the ASCII letter A, to the radio, and then the radio sends a perfect A. Now it works. It's generally one character latent. So for an E, that's pretty short, but for a 0, that's pretty long. So the way Flex Radio does it is we actually send key down, key up timing units to the radio measured in milliseconds. So your fist is not sanitized. You maintain, if you send crap, you get crap out of the radio. If you've got a very specific fist, your friends will still be able to recognize you. The side toad is generated locally here. And the Flex Radio Maestro, by the way, has this all built in, which is by far the easiest way to run remote, is to sit a Maestro on your desk and have it connect to the radio. It's got all the normal interfaces on the back of the radio for headphones, push-to-talk switch, microphone, CW key, speakers, etc. Back to SmartLink, which is the tool we use. It's actually, as I said, it's peer-to-peer, low latency, and it's secure. It's got a TLS connection, which is the same thing your bank uses. You don't require any networking skills, so you don't need to worry about port forwarding. We set that up for you automatically using a tool called Universal Plug and Play. Simple username authentication, and you can connect with from anywhere. You can share your radio with someone else. You just have to share your username and password. Not the worst thing, because when we had ham shacks in clubs, everybody had a key. So same thing. So it really does handle all the complexity. And now we can operate from the living room, the backyard patio, a hotel, your camper, an airport, vacations, and some guys, a lot of truckers actually carry a Maestro in their cab, and then they just get on their cellular data and they connect back home and they're on HF. Surprisingly large number. So the reward of going remote is we get something that's quieter. We get to use much better antennas in compromised areas. We don't have such a cluttered desk. It's easy to share. And hopefully that gets us on the air a bit more. The ham shack is no longer jammed in the corner. Like as a kid when I grew up, I was in a crawl space. It was 3.5 feet high. Somehow I dragged a Model 15 teletype in there and got it on a table and got on the air. And you haven't know if you haven't annoyed your parents when you start copying W1AW bulletins on the typewriter on the teletype, and and you're sitting right under the kitchen. It's a good way to make friends. Thanks to network connections. So the last thing. So in May of 25, Flex announced a new HF radio called the Aurora, and we were able to build a 500-watt box that plugs in the wall. It has a tuner in it. It has bandpass filters. It produces 500 watts, key down, and it has almost no duty cycle. So you can go full power forever. At Dayton, we did it for 8 hours straight. UAM operators that like to get a little long, you can just you can go key down for half an hour. It's not going to get hot. 500 watt QR output. It doesn't get hot. It runs cool because the amplifiers internally run in class D. Well, you're probably going to say those are the difference. It's not going to work on sideband, but it does because it's DSP for the transmitter, not just DSP for the receiver. And it's thanks to a technology called polar modulation, which, while not invented by Tony Kilo 1 Kilo Papa, Tony Brock Fisher, was actually invented by Leonard Kahn back in 1952. But Tony got this idea first organically and then learned about Leonard Kahn subsequently. Pretty cool thing. I've got a lot of customers that have sold everything and they're down to one box on their desk or remote. And this is now my one remote radio. The amplifier's gone, my tuner's gone, my power supply's gone. I don't need them anymore. It's one box on the shelf, plug it in the wall. And that brings us to the point for questions. I threw a lot of data out there in a hurry.
Mike, this is your contact, Dennis, WR4I, can you hear me?
Yep, 5x9.
Yeah, okay, all the way to Canada. Anyway, thank you very much for doing this presentation this evening. And I was privileged enough to go to your Flex booth last year. And actually, you were the one I talked to. Now that I see you put a face to the post here. So thank you very much for demonstrating all the good stuff up there. And I think that's a great idea. What I'm trying to do is convince our club to have a club station, just like you mentioned, because many of us are of the senior citizen type and are in compromised areas like retirement communities and condos. But anyway, I think it's a great concept, and certainly that Aurora is looking mighty good. So again, thank you very much for doing this. And how's the weather up there, by the way?
I'll get to the weather in a minute. You're absolutely right. Because now you can take an iPhone or an iPad into one of our, ham radio family that might be in a hospital as a shut-in, and you can get them on 75 meters, and they can tell a world about a whole series of drugs the other ones have never heard of. Hang on, I'll get back to the weather. So a week ago, I had 18 inches of snow in my backyard. It was winter like normal. The last 2 days, we've hit 70 Fahrenheit, which is incredibly unusual for this time in March, and rain. My snow's all gone. And today I was walking around outside in shorts, and tonight I'll have freezing rain. So it's everywhere.
Michael,
N3US.
Mike, could you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, I'm Ed, N3US. I've been
Ed.
a ham since 1963. I'm a retired engineer. I've tried to keep up with technology. One reason I've always resisted equipment like Flexes, I have this phobia and others have reported, let's say Microsoft comes out with a Windows update and then all of a sudden the rigs aren't working, they can't get audio in or out. And I hate to be tethered to another Windows system. If you use Maestro or Aurora, do you get away from that issue?
You could use a Maestro or M model radio. It runs on a Windows embedded client, but it's sandbox, so it's not updated, type of thing. So you don't have to worry about that. It's the same thing they use in aircraft and healthcare.
Okay.
Okay.
And what's the approximate price of the Aurora?
So the entry-level Aurora radio, it sounds expensive, but if you start with a clean bench, it sort of lands and it's cheaper by about $1,500. So if you bought a radio and you bought an amplifier and a tuner and a power supply, $61.99 gets you the Aurora 510, and then your interface is a tablet or Windows or whatever, and that's all free. Tablet's not. The iOS stuff is not, but the Windows application is free. The other good thing, though, to talk about your concern is the API to communicate with the radio is open and published, and there's no security keys. So if you decided this comes along and Microsoft becomes dead worldwide, it would be easy today. Well, maybe easy even with today's AIs to build your own client to connect and communicate with the radio. So it's, and we have people doing that in Linux right now. The iOS, the iPad software was written by Marcus, DL8 MRE, totally on his own. And it's all plain text, very easy stuff to work with.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Really enjoyed your presentation.
Yeah. I'll throw in a question for Joe there. Joe cannot see. What options are there? All those thousands of buttons work pretty well for Joe because he's got a memory like an elephant. But any thoughts on that?
There's a fair question. I'm not fully versed on cited options, although there is a tool that used to work, name escapes me, JJ, you'll know what it is. What I have been hoping is that smarter people than me that are motivated in that category would make use of tools like Node-RED for a visual or an expanded interface if you're totally blind, or control boxes like Stream Deck, which will then allow you to map buttons to do certain features of functionality. I think some people are doing it. I've not tripped over that, but it's a fair question. We are not doing anything specific in that category at the moment. And I don't know what the roadmap is for it. But fair question. The Maestro.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, no. Well, I'm just going to ask about the latency. I know you say it's not sort of the issue that we're concerned with, but I just think of the latency of digging into a pileup and where milliseconds matter. I mean, the whole way you get in and out of some pileups is by estimating exactly what the time delay should be.
I don't know. I've got Bouvet on multiple bands. I think latency gets a bad rap because have you ever been on the other end of a pileup? It's not the first. It's not the first letter you hear. It's the first complete call you copy that you call back. Right. And even 25 second millisecond latency, that's not very long. That's incredibly short. And yet it sounds like a big number, but it really isn't. 50 milliseconds has, I think, how far does sound travel in 50 milliseconds? Is it 50 feet type of thing? It's not really an issue. And I've been running remote I find that the reason I can't get into break pileups isn't that timing issue. It's the big timing issue. Did I call with everybody else, or did I wait 2 call sign cycles, which usually gets me in a big pileup. You know, QRZ, VA3MW, you know, because it's everybody, less everybody, and hopefully a few more less everybody's, especially in sideband. I mean, but sideband's a slugfest today. And digital latency doesn't matter because he's either going to decode you or not.
Mike,
Yeah.
Dennis, I just add QRP to my call.
Thank you.
And they
Do you
always
want, so,
answer.
do you know some of my, yeah, do you want to know what some of my, I'm going to put this politely, hopefully I don't offend anybody, dickhead ham friends do? So if you say QRP, they go turn the amplifier off and say, so how do you copy me now?
Oh, so the Aurora, how far down will it go?
So we can go to 1% power, which is 5 watts.
5 watts, thank goodness, all right.
If you really want to go lower, you can use the transverter port and you can go to plus 10 dBm.
Well,
By the way, one thing really quickly on Aurora, at 500 watts out, at 120 volts, you're drawing 6 amps. At 100 watts, you're drawing just about 1.3 amps. At 50 watts, it's about 600 milliamps at 120 volts because it's 80 to 90% efficient. So you don't need to rewire the shack.
Here we go. I want to ask the question.
All right.
Good, we got one more question.
If go or.
No, that's just us.
Good.
Yeah, more if go. Sure. All right. Mike, Chris Baker, I'm KE2EAF. You mentioned a couple things. So I was holding out for the Aurora 610 or 510 or whatever it is. And someone sold me a 6500 in January for a steal. And it's the best thing ever. But here's the thing. So I run cybersecurity for a university health system in town. You might have heard of it, University of Virginia. And I tried for weeks. So I'm a big Tailscale user. You mentioned Tailscale. I tried for weeks to make it so that I didn't have to open up any ports on my firewall. And I'm coming at it from, a cybersecurity angle, but I'm also thinking about everyone in this room. They're not cybersecurity experts. At least I don't think you are. And making a mistake like that on a firewall config could be potentially very damaging. And so I looked up and down, and I think there's some technical reason, and I won't get into it here, why I can't do that. So I had to break down, and I opened up the 2 ports that you need to open up so I can use it here. I actually did a CWQ, so 5 minutes before the meeting started in the back with WB0 RLJ, just for fun. I broke through a pilot too, so it works, believe me. But is there any roadmap in the future for either a Tailscale or some sort of a connectivity that doesn't require the 2 things that drive me the most crazy? One is opening up ports on my firewall, and the second is sharing my username and password with other people.
So second question first, that will be iShare Radio.
Okay.
We talked
But
about.
then I'm in the group, whatever that is, with all the
No,
other
no, no.
people.
That's all your own world. It's like, imagine it's like a golf cart rental thing or whatever you want it to be. Totally customizable. So maybe that didn't come across right. For you, in a corporate environment. Okay, so in a house environment, it doesn't much matter unless there's something on the end of the open port to actually answer the call. So I can sit here and look at my pfSense firewall and see those 2 ports being pounded all the time, right? But there's nothing to answer. So, and you and I don't get the chance to explain the risk of what an open port really means. That is it a big deal? It can be. Is it really? Do I care if somebody gets inside my network at home? Probably not. You would, you're trained there. But for you, you've got to figure out how to encapsulate that into a secure tunnel. So maybe your answer is D40, which will then build you a Tailscale tunnel. And all they want is you put the hardware there, which is a Pi as a year-end client. And they want 50 euros, which is a donation to the D4C amateur radio station. and just, you know, for Hanno's time. So otherwise you'd be bombarded to do it for free. But soft ether VPN, where I just ran a Pi on my own little radio network in-house, worked because it encapsulates the two ports. There's one UDP and one TCP port.
But what
And then
you're
you have
saying is run smart SDR in the house with the radio or locally with
Run the radio, put a
Yeah.
client, a VPN client on the radio. Tailscale does it well. Let it do its weird, freaky magic that seems to be pretty low latency, and go from there.
Yeah, so for things like FTA, you could connect to the radio over, you know, any kind of tailscale or any kind of thing, and then operate it play on the radio, right?
So this is why I ran the PC at the remote end. Yes, nothing technically stopping you from doing that, but why bother sending time-dependent UDP streams out when they're going to get dropped and I'll get audio corruption? So run it all local and just echo the screen out in an RDP session.
So I don't know if anyone here uses FTP. I heard CW a lot, so that was I was
FTA.
trying to W remote too. You know, that would be the dream. So I live in Philly. I work here. It's 250 miles north. So that was what I had to do, was get to a point where I'm remote. I'm here most of the week. I need to be able to use my radio up there and be remote. Yeah.
So let me see if this works. I'm going to share a monitor and you're going to get a video echo. Then I'm going to do virtual screen shift, you know, because I use Windows virtual screens. And so right now this should cause a big mess. Can you see an FT8 screen right now?
On the left, yeah.
It did change. So this is my remote screen right now, 100 miles away, and I'm on 30 meters. And interestingly enough, I don't hear Beauvais. Oh, look at that in Pirate. So, you know, but here's my antenna control. Here's my station controller right now. And this is how I operate digital remotely. This is, you know, you can see at the top, this is a remote desktop connection. Happens to be on a VPN, but it could have been on Tailscale too. I have multiple tunnels into my remote world just in case one of them fails. So
Thanks so much for tonight.
does that make it all make sense?
Yeah. D40, you said?
D40. Yeah, just Google D40. D4ZERO. Anybody else? I know that was a little deep dive, but it wasn't as ugly as it sounded.
I'm available as a resource to the client.
So your next presentation is
Yep, it's how to secure your network.
how to secure your network.
Next presentation is to our treasurer.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Mike, for bringing the
All right, and if you ever want me to come back and do the whole in-depth Aurora presentation, just let me know.
Thank you very much.
Okay.